At 18, Clara Hensley had $47, one canvas duffel bag, and nobody in the world waiting up for her. The foster system had aged her out on a Tuesday, handed her a folder of paperwork, and wished her luck. So when the county auctioned off the old Doyle textile mill, 3 stories of broken windows and rusted brick on the edge of Harlan Falls, Clara raised her hand and bought it for $5, because nobody else would. People laughed. The clerk asked her twice if she understood what she was signing. But 6 weeks later, standing in the boiler room with a crowbar in her hands, Clara found a steel door behind the old furnace, a door with a lock that wasn't on any blueprint. Sealed by a woman who had died 3 years before Clara ever set foot in that town. What was locked behind it would change everything she thought she knew about being alone. The folder they gave Clara at the county office had a cheerful blue cover. Inside it were the papers of a life that had never quite started, a birth certificate, a social security card, a list of shelters, printed in 2019, half of them closed, and a check for $211, which the caseworker called a transition stipend and which Clara called, privately, the price of 18 years. She had been in the system since she was 6. 11 placements, 4 schools, 2 families that almost kept her, and one that she still dreamed about sometimes. The way you dream about a house you lived in once and can't find again. The last placement had been with the Muellers, out past the fairgrounds. They were not cruel. They were just done. Mrs. Mueller had hugged her at the door with the duffel bag between them and said, "You're a smart girl, Clara. You'll figure it out." Then the door closed. That first night, Clara slept in the bus depot on Cedar Street, sitting up, with the duffel bag looped through her arm. The depot had hard plastic benches and a vending machine that hummed like something trying to remember a song. A security guard walked past her twice. The second time, he set a granola bar on the bench beside her without a word and kept walking. She ate it slowly, in small bites to make it last. Harlan Falls was not a big town. It sat in the foothills where the Piedmont starts to wrinkle up toward the Blue Ridge, a river town built on red clay and cotton money that had run out 60 years ago. Kudzu ate the fence lines. The old downtown had a diner, a hardware store, a church with a leaning steeple, and a lot of windows with paper in them. And above it all, on the bluff by the river, stood the mill, Doyle Textile Mill. Clara had passed it 100 times on the school bus. 3 stories of dark brick, a smokestack with the letters DOYLE going down the side in painted white, most of the paint gone. The windows were tall and arched, and mostly broken. Pigeons went in and out of them like the building was breathing. Kids said it was haunted. Adults said it was a shame. Nobody said it was worth anything. Clara spent that first week learning the arithmetic of having nothing. The $211 became $180 after food, $160 after a week of lockers at the depot. The shelter in Ashton was 40 minutes away and full. The one in Harlan Falls had closed in 2021. She applied at the diner. She applied at the Dollar General. She applied at the poultry plant out on Route 9 where the man behind the desk looked at her address line. She had written the depot's street number because it was the only address she had and said, "We'll call you." Nobody called. On the 9th day, it rained. Not a passing shower, but a cold gray March rain that came down like it had somewhere to be. Clara stood under the awning of Whitaker's Hardware with her duffel bag getting wet at the corner, and she watched the water run down the gutter, carrying red clay toward the river, and for the first time since the Mueller's door closed, she let herself cry. Not loud, not long, just enough. Then she wiped her face with the heel of her hand, because crying was a thing you could afford for about 90 seconds when you were down to $140. It was on the 10th day that she saw the notice. It was stapled to the corkboard inside the post office, between a flyer for a lost beagle and a church potluck. County tax sale, it said. Delinquent properties. Public auction, Saturday 10 a.m., County Annex. And there, third on the list in smudged toner, parcel 1462. Former Doyle Textile Mill, 4 River Bluff Road. Minimum bid, $5. Clara read it 3 times. $5. A building. A roof, part of a roof anyway. Walls, a door that locked, presumably, somewhere in all that brick. She asked the postmaster if the notice was a joke. He looked over his glasses at her and said, "Honey, that mill's been on the county's books so long they'd pay somebody to take it. Back taxes got wiped in the settlement when old Miss Doyle passed. Nobody wants it. Roof's bad. River lots got restrictions. It's a hole you pour money into, but somebody could just buy it. For $5. Somebody could, he said. Nobody has. Saturday came bright and cold. The county annex smelled like floor wax and burnt coffee. There were maybe 20 people in the folding chairs, most of them there for a foreclosed rental on Maple Street that went for $41,000 to a man in a golf jacket who never stopped chewing gum. Then the clerk read out parcel 144062, the former Doyle Textile Mill. Minimum bid $5. Sold as is, where is, all false. Silence. Somebody in the back chuckled. The man in the golf jacket checked his phone. Clara stood up. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted, so she said it again, louder. $5. Every head in the room turned. The clerk blinked at her over the podium. Ma'am. Miss. You understand this is the mill property? The industrial parcel on River Bluff? Yes, sir, you understand it's sold as is. County makes no warranty on condition. There's no utilities on. You understand that? Yes, sir. He looked at her for a long moment, the way people had been looking at Clara her whole life, like a problem that belonged to someone else. Then he shrugged. $5 going once, going twice. The gavel came down like a door closing, except this time Clara was on the inside of it. The paperwork took 40 minutes. She signed her name 11 times. The deed clerk, a round woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain, kept glancing up at her between stamps. You got family helping you with this, sweetheart? No, ma'am. You know that place hasn't had the power on since Margaret Doyle died. 3 years now. Who was she? Clara asked. Margaret Doyle? The clerk stopped stamping. Something moved across her face, quick as a bird's shadow. Miss Meg, she said. She was the last of the Doyles. Ran that mill by herself longer than anybody thought possible. Kept it going till 98, and then just kept it. Lived in the office, some said. She slid the deed across the counter. Folks around here thought a lot of Miss Meg. More than she ever knew, probably. Clara took the deed. It was 1 page, and it weighed nothing, and it was the first thing she had ever owned that could not fit in a duffel bag. She walked out of the annex into the cold sunlight, 18 years old with $135, a canvas bag and a textile mill. Behind her, she heard the man in the golf jacket laugh and say something to the clerk. She didn't catch all of it. Just one word. Wasted. Clara kept walking. She had spent her whole life being told, in 100 polite ways, that things given to her were wasted. The word didn't even sting anymore, it just made her walk faster. Up the hill, toward the river. Toward the enormous ruined thing that was hers. The gate to the mill yard was chained, but the chain was rusted through, and it gave on the second pull. The hinges screamed like they hadn't been asked to do anything in years. The yard was a field of broken pallets and pokeweed. Red clay showed through the gravel in long scars. A loading dock sagged at one end of the building like a tired jaw, and above it, 3 stories of arched windows stared down at her. Most of them missing their glass, all of them dark. Clara stood in the middle of the yard with her deed folded in her jacket pocket and said, out loud, to nobody, "Okay." The main door was oak, gray with age, and unlocked. The lock had been pried off years ago by whoever came to steal the copper. Inside, the mill was a cathedral of dust. Light came down through the broken windows in long slanted columns, and in every column, dust turned slowly, like the building was full of held breath. The main floor ran the length of the building, punctuated by iron columns. Most of the machines were long gone, sold or scrapped, leaving bolt holes in the floor like the footprints of extinct animals. But at the far end, near the office, one loom remained. It was enormous, cast iron, taller than Clara, black with age and furred with dust. Somebody had covered part of it with a canvas tarp, and the tarp had been tucked in at the corners. Not thrown. Tucked, Clara walked toward it slowly, her footsteps loud and all that quiet. Hanging from the loom's frame, on a beaded chain, was a pair of reading glasses. They hung there like their owner had just stepped away, to answer a phone, to check the mail, to see about the weather. The lenses were filmed with dust. Clara reached out and touched them, very lightly, and the chain swung, and stilled. The office door stood open at the end of the floor. It was a small room with a roll-top desk, a wood stove, a cot in the corner with a folded quilt on it, and a wall calendar stopped forever on a month 3 years gone. On the desk sat a tin of peppermints, the old-fashioned kind, red and white. Beside the tin, Propped against a coffee mug was a punch card, the kind workers used to clock in. Yellowed and soft at the corners. Clara picked it up and read the faded ink at the top. Doyle, Margaret, employee no. 1. First shift. June 1954. 1954. Miss Meg had punched in at her own family's mill, first shift, when she couldn't have been much older than Clara was now. And somebody, Meg herself it had to be, had kept that card for 70 years. Propped where she could see it from the cot. Clara set it back exactly where it had been. She spent that first afternoon just walking the building. The second floor had been storage, the third was open to the sky in one corner where the roof had failed, and rain had rotted a wide circle of floorboards beneath. Pigeons argued in the rafters. In the stairwell, someone had written names in pencil on the plaster going back decades. Ruby 61, T, W. 77, Lostas 89, a guest book of working lives. But it was the boiler room that stopped her. It was in the basement, down a switchback of iron stairs, a low-ceilinged room with the furnace crouched in the middle of it like something out of a story. A riveted iron beast, cold for decades. Its door hanging open on a black throat. The coal chute was bricked over. Pipes ran everywhere overhead, wrapped in crumbling cloth. And behind the furnace, in the shadows where the light from the stairwell barely reached, the wall was wrong. Clara couldn't have said how she knew. The bricks were the same bricks, but the mortar lines didn't quite carry through, and there was a seam, a tall, straight seam, the height of a door, and when she pressed her palm flat against the bricks inside that seam, they were cold in a different way. Metal cold. She rapped a knuckle against it. The wall rang, very faintly. Hollow. There was a door back there. A steel door, faced over with a single course of brick veneer, and near where a handle should be, a small square plate with a keyhole in it. The keyhole had been stuffed with wax. Clara stood in the dark of the boiler room with her heart going hard, and every ghost story every kid in Harlan Falls had ever told about this place walked up and down her spine. Then she thought about it sensibly, the way you learn to when nobody is coming to explain things to you. A hidden door with a lock meant somebody had something worth locking up. And somebody who stuffed the keyhole with wax wasn't hiding a thing from thieves. They were saving it. From weather, from time, for someone. Clara went back up the iron stairs into the last of the daylight, and that night she slept on Miss Meg's cot under Miss Meg's quilt, with the deed folded under the pillow and the reading glasses hanging 50 feet away in the dark, keeping their watch over the loom. She did not know yet that half the town knew she was there before morning. She found out because of the coffee. It arrived at 7 in the morning, in a green thermos, set on the loading dock with a paper bag of biscuits and no note. Clara stood in the doorway in yesterday's clothes and looked up and down River Bluff Road, and there was nobody. Just the thermos, still warm. She ate both biscuits and drank the coffee and decided that if this was how hauntings worked in Harlan Falls, she could live with it. That day, she started cleaning. Not because she had a plan, she didn't, not yet, but because cleaning was free. And the mill was hers, and her hands needed something to hold besides worry. She swept the office. She washed the tall windows she could reach on the main floor, using rainwater and newspaper. She carried broken pallets to a pile in the yard until her arms shook. And on the third day, while cleaning out the roll-top desk, she found the journal. It was in the bottom drawer, which stuck, and then gave all at once. Inside, wrapped in a flour sack towel, was a ledger book, green cloth cover. Red spine. The corners worn round as river stones. On the first page, in a small upright hand, M. Doyle, private. If found, you may as well read it. I'm past embarrassment. Clara laughed out loud, the first time she'd laughed since the Muller's door, and then she sat down on the cot with the afternoon light coming amber through the clean windows, and she read. It was not a diary. Not exactly. It was 60 years of margins. Grocery lists sat next to grief. Thread orders next to prayers, and threaded through all of it, in that same small hand were entries that made Clara slow down and read twice. March 1971. Gave the Tillman boy his daddy's back wages plus 40. Told him it was owed. It wasn't. Owed is a bigger word than money. November 1983. Roof fund for the Am Church. Sent it through Pastor Vance so it wouldn't have my name on it. A name on a gift is a receipt. August 1990. Paid the light bill at the depot boarding rooms through winter. Children sleeping there. A town that lets children sleep cold deserves its ghosts. Page after page. $50 here, a tank of heating oil there, a semester of nursing school for a girl whose name Clara didn't recognize. 3 funerals paid quietly, a decade of Christmas hams sent to the second shift after there stopped being a second shift. Miss Meg had run out of mill, and then she had spent 30 years running a different kind of operation out of this office. Alone, in secret, giving away a fortune in amounts small enough that no one ever added them up. Near the back of the ledger, one entry was underlined. It was the only one. The furnace keeps what matters. When the right one comes, Earl has what they'll need. He'll know. I told him, not the one who asks, the one who stays. Clara read it until the light failed. The furnace keeps what matters. The steel door behind the furnace, the wax in the keyhole, the tucked tarp, the coffee on the dock. None of it was an accident. Somewhere in this town was a man named Earl who was holding something, waiting, on the instructions of a dead woman, for a person he would recognize by one quality only. Not the one who asks, the one who stays. Clara closed the ledger and held it against her chest in the dark, and she made the only decision she was equipped to make. She would not ask. She would stay. The journal changed the way Clara moved through the building. She had been camping in a ruin. Now she was living in the middle of somebody's unfinished sentence. She started reading a few pages every night by flashlight, rationing it the way she'd rationed the granola bar. Meg's voice got into her head, dry, unsentimental, kind in the way a good coat is kind. There was an entry from 1998, the week the mill finally closed, that Clara read so many times she could recite it. Lock the gates today. 41 years, employee number 1 to employee last. The men from the bank kept saying the word asset. This building is not an asset. It is 400 people's Tuesdays. You cannot foreclose on a Tuesday. I signed their papers and I kept my keys. And another, undated, in shakier ink near the end. People think I stayed out of stubbornness. Let them. The truth is simpler, and I will not write it yet, even here. Some things you leave where the heat can't get them. Where the heat can't get them. Behind a furnace that would never burn again. Clara went down the iron stairs that night and stood in front of the bricked seam with her flashlight. And she pressed her hand flat against the cold metal under the veneer. I'm not asking, she told it. I'm just saying good night. Then she went back upstairs, wound the clock she'd found in the desk, and went to sleep to the sound of the river working past the bluff, patient as a ledger, wearing everything down to what it really was. There was exactly one Earl in Harlan Falls, and he owned the hardware store. Whitaker's Hardware sat on Main Street between the diner and an empty storefront that had been a shoe shop, a video store, and a church, in that order. The bell over the door was a real bell. The floors were real oak. Earl Whitaker was somewhere north of 70, built like a fence post, with white hair and half glasses and a carpenter's pencil behind one ear that Clara never once saw him use. She came in on a Thursday to price roofing tar, counted out what she could afford, which was not enough tar, and Earl watched her do the math on her fingers at the counter. You the one bought the mill, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir, $5. He said it the way people say a hand of cards back to you. Yes, sir. Earl looked at her for a while over the half glasses. Behind him, a wall of little drawers went up to the ceiling, every one labeled in the same small upright hand, and Clara's breath caught, because she knew that handwriting. She had been sleeping 50 feet from 60 years of it. Miss Meg labeled your drawers, she said, before she could stop herself. Something went across Earl's face, quick, like the deed clerk's bird shadow. She did, he said slowly. 1981. Flood took my stockroom. She come down with a label gun and a casserole and didn't leave till it was done. He straightened a stack of washers that did not need straightening. You been in her things, then I've been in my things, Clara said. I bought the building. Then, because his eyebrows came up, I'm sorry. That came out harder than I meant it. People keep waiting for me to leave. I'm not leaving. Earl looked at her a long moment more. Huh, he said. And then he rang up the roofing tar, all of it. The full 5 gallons. And when she started to say she couldn't, he talked straight over her. It's on account. I don't have an account. You do now. Everybody who keeps that mill standing has an account. He pushed the tar across the counter. Anything else? Clara had 100 questions, and the biggest one was shaped like a steel door, and she looked at Earl Whitaker and she nearly asked it. The ledger line ran through her head like a wire pulling tight. Not the one who asks. No, sir, she said. Thank you." She was at the door, bell already singing when Earl spoke behind her. "Girl." She turned. He was writing in his account book, not looking up. "Coffee suit you? On the dock?" It did. "Yes, sir." "Good," said Earl Whitaker, and that was all he said. After that, the town stopped pretending it wasn't watching. It happened the way things happen in small places. Not a flood, a seep. Ramey from the diner started leaving the day's unsold pie on the dock next to the thermos, because it only goes to the hogs otherwise. A retired electrician named Gus Salazar showed up one Saturday. Said he'd wired half that mill in 1979 and didn't trust anybody else's opinion of it, and spent 6 hours in the walls muttering. He pronounced the main floor dead but honest, and got the office and one string of lights safely onto a generator he claimed was just taking up space in his truck. Pastor Van's daughter ran the food pantry out of the AIM church basement, and she started sending Clara home, with boxes. When Clara protested, the woman looked at her flatly and said, "Child, do you have any idea what that roof you're sleeping under paid for in this town?" "I'm starting to," Clara said. Teenagers came to gawk and stayed to haul pallets when Clara put them to work without asking if they wanted to be put to work. An old woman named Iris Cole walked up the hill one evening with a mason jar of zinnias, set them on the loading dock, touched the brick with her whole hand, and left without a word. Later, Clara found the name Cole in the stairwell pencil guest book. Twice, piece by piece, the town told her about Meg. Never all at once, never straight on. Meg had carried the second shift's pay out of her own pocket for a year in '91 before anyone knew the contracts had gone. Meg had sat in the back pew. Always. Meg had turned down 4 buyers. 6, 8, the number grew with the telling, including a Charlotte man who came twice a year like a season. She could have been rich, Dot said, boxing up pie. She was rich, Earl said from his stool, and the diner went quiet a moment and nobody argued. Not everything came easy. In late April, the county sent a man in a hard hat who walked the building with a clipboard and left Clara with a notice. The standpipe and 2 floor sections were condemned pending repair, 90 days, or the building would be posted no occupancy, which meant no her. No anything. Gus read the notice, whistled low, and said the words Clara had learned to dread. 9,000. Maybe 8 if the steel's honest. $8,000. Clara had 94, a deed and a ledger full of a dead woman's kindness that she would not sell, could not sell, any more than she could sell the glasses off the loom. She sat on the dock that night doing arithmetic that would not resolve, and the river ran on below, patient, indifferent, wearing the world down to what it really was. She thought, for the first time since the auction, maybe the man in the golf jacket was right. Then the morning came, and the thermos was on the dock, and stapled to the paper bag was a note in Earl's blunt pencil. The first note anyone had left her. Don't do nothing stupid like quit, E-double. She didn't quit. But she learned, that month, exactly how heavy staying could get. The 90 days had a sound to them. Clara could hear the deadline ticking in everything, in the drip she chased across the 3rd floor with buckets, in the standpipe's rusted silence, in the polite, terrible patience of the county's letterhead. She took to reading Meg's journal at night not for the secrets anymore, but for the company. It turned out Meg had known this exact sound. June 1998. The men from the bank use the word inevitable like it's a fact of nature. Nothing about a town is inevitable. A town is a decision people make every morning. So is giving up. I have decided to keep making the first one. Clara copied that line onto a scrap of pattern paper and pinned it over the desk, and when the arithmetic got loud, she read it and made the first decision again. The town kept making it with her, in its sideways fashion. Gus came back with a friend named Otho who had been a boilermaker at the plant in Ashton. And the 2 old men spent a Saturday crawling around the standpipe with flashlights, arguing happily, and emerged to announce that 6 of the $9,000 the county wanted was, in Otho's professional opinion, padding for some contractor's boat. They wrote up their own scope of repair, stamped by an engineer Otho had known since Korea. The war or the church trip, don't ask. And the county, to everyone's surprise, accepted it. 8,000 became 5,200. 5,200 was still the moon, but it was a nearer moon. Iris Cole told her about Meg in pieces. On the Tuesdays, how Meg had hired women on the floor in 1959 when the other mills wouldn't, and paid them the men's rate, and dared anybody to make something of it. How Meg had stood in the yard in '74, The year the orders halved and told the assembled shifts the truth with numbers in it. Because, she said, grown people can carry the truth, it's the not knowing that breaks their backs. How Meg had never married, and how the town had theories, and how the theories had all died of old age while Meg outlasted everyone who held them. Was she happy? Clara asked once, threading a bobbin. Alone up here all those years? Iris considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. She was useful, Iris said finally. For some people that's the same door, just a different key. Then she looked at Clara over her mending, a long look, and added, You'd know something about that, I expect. The pantry boxes kept coming. The pie kept coming. A man Clara had never met left a cord of split firewood on the dock in July, which Earl said was the most Harlan Falls thing he'd ever heard of, getting your winter kindness in early to beat the rush. Somebody's grandson power washed the smokestack letters one weekend without asking, so that DOYLE came up out of the grime white and sudden, visible from the highway bridge. And for a week afterward, strangers kept pulling into the yard just to ask what was happening up here. What do I tell them? Clara asked Dot. Tell them it's reopening, Dot said, refilling her cup. Then figure out what that means. That's the order Meg would have done it in. At night, Clara walked the floor with the lantern before bed. A habit that had started as checking for leaks and turned into something more like rounds, the way a nurse walks a ward. The loom, the office, the stairwell with its pencil names. And last, always, the iron stairs down to the boiler room, where she'd stand a minute in front of the bricked seam and the wax-stopped lock, close enough to touch it, and not touch it. Still here, she'd tell the door. Still not asking, the door kept its counsel. But climbing back up the stairs one August night, lantern swinging, Clara realized the fear had changed shape when she wasn't looking. She was no longer afraid of losing a building. She was afraid of losing a life. This one. The one with Tuesdays in it. Which meant, she understood with a clarity that stopped her on the landing, that somewhere between the auction gavel and this lantern, the thing everyone had laughed at had quietly become true. She was home. Home came with paperwork. Naturally, Priya, who had taken to stopping by on her Ashton days to check on my favorite lost cause, helped her register the mending room properly, open a real bank account, get insurance that made the agent drive up and walk the floor twice before he'd quote it. Clara learned to keep books. She ruled her own columns in a composition notebook, income on the left, the standpipe fund on the right, and if her handwriting started leaning small and upright like somebody else's, nobody mentioned it. She learned the town's rhythms the way you learn a house in the dark. Sunday mornings the hill went quiet, and the church bells overlapped from 3 directions, never quite in time. Thursday was pension day, and the diner ran out of pie by 2. The first cool night in September, every porch on Cedar Street would have a light on. Iris told her, so the walkers know they can stop. A custom nobody could date and nobody would drop. And Clara learned about the boy at the depot before she ever met him, the way she was learning everything now, sideways at the counter in pieces. Dot mentioned a kid who nursed one coffee for 3 hours on cold mornings. Pastor Van's daughter mentioned a new face at the pantry, young, wouldn't take a full box, only what fits in a bag, like he's keeping ready to run. Earl mentioned nothing but started leaving the store's outside faucet unlocked, which Clara understood by then was Earl Whitaker's native language. She held the pieces and didn't force them. Some accounts, Meg's ledger said, you can only open when the other party's ready to sign. So Clara kept the light burning over the loading dock later than she needed to, night after night. All through that autumn, a $5 bulb, a small unreasonable hope, and she waited the way the mill had waited for her. Not asking. Staying, the idea came from the quilt. Clara was mending it, Miss Meg's quilt, worn through at one corner, with a needle from the office drawer and thread from a cone she'd found by the loom. And Dot Ramey watched her do it at the diner counter one slow afternoon and said, Lord, girl, where'd you learn an invisible stitch like that? Group home in Ashton, Clara said. Mrs. Okafor. She said idle hands were the devil's, so she taught us hemming. She bit the thread. I can do zippers too. And buttonholes. Dot put down the coffee pot. You know there is not one soul left in this county who does alterations. Not since the dry cleaner in Ashton went. People are driving to Charlotte to get a suit taken in. Clara looked up. The mending room opened 3 weeks later, on the ground floor of Doyle Mill, in the corner where the light came good through the tall, clean windows. It was one long table Gus built from door slabs, 2 donated sewing machines, an ironing station, and a hand-painted sign Dot's granddaughter made. The mending room at Doyle Mill, repairs, alterations, patience. The first week she took in $11. The second week, $40. Then the funeral home in Ashton found her. Funeral homes always need suits altered fast, and then the church choirs. And then the school, 40 band uniforms 2 sizes wrong. By June, Clara was working 10-hour days at the long table, and the jar where she kept the standpipe fund had $300 in it, then $5, then $900, growing like something planted. It wasn't 8,000, it wasn't close, and the 90 days were burning down. But the mill had light in its windows in the evening for the first time in 25 years, and people slowed their trucks on River Bluff Road to look at it. And old Iris Cole came in every Tuesday to sit by the loom with her mending and her memories, and honestly, sometimes the mending was just an excuse. One evening, Clara locked the big oak door, put the day's money in the jar, and stood a while by the loom, the way she'd gotten in the habit of doing, one hand on the cold iron frame, the reading glasses swaying just slightly on their chain. Day 61, she told the loom. 940 in the jar. Roof's dry. Nobody's quit. The glasses swung and stilled. Now, stay with me here, because everything you think you know about this story is about to be wrong. And I mean everything. The steel door is still down there in the dark, and we haven't even gotten to the man in the golf jacket, who is about to come back into Clara's life in the worst possible way. If this story's got its hooks in you like it had in me, take 1 second and subscribe, because the second half of this one is the reason I'm telling it at all. His name was Grant Pelham, and Clara recognized the gum before she recognized the face. He came on a Monday in July, in a pickup too clean to have ever worked, and he stood in the doorway of the mending room in the golf jacket, a different golf jacket, but the same species of man, and he looked around the mill floor the way an appraiser looks at a casket. Miss Hensley. He had a good handshake and used it like a tool. Grant Pelham. Pelham Riverline Development. We build waterfront communities. You've got a remarkable property here. Thank you. It's not for sale. Pelham smiled like she'd said something charming. Everybody says that in the first meeting. Here's the thing. He set a folder on her cutting table, on top of a choir robe. Riverline is developing the bluff. 42 units, marina access. The county's very excited. Your parcel is the anchor. I'm authorized to offer you $40,000 today for a building you paid $5 for. He spread his hands. That's the best return in the history of this county. It's not for sale, Mr. Pelham. The smile stayed, but something behind it changed shifts. You're 18, he said, gently, like a doctor delivering news. You're sleeping in a condemned industrial building. I checked. You've got a repair order you can't cover coming due in what, 20 days? Take the money, kid, go to school, get an apartment with a shower. This town's nostalgia is not your responsibility. Have a good afternoon, Mr. Pelham. He picked up his folder, taking his time about it. At the door he paused, and when he turned around, the smile was gone and Clara finally got to see the actual man. I came here polite, he said, because polite is cheaper. But understand me, I've been working this bluff for 2 years. I'm not going to be held up by a teenager with a sewing machine and a $5 deed. There are questions about that auction, Miss Hensley. Real questions. You should have read what you were signing. The certified letter came 9 days later. Gus drove her to the free legal clinic in Ashton, where a young attorney named Priya Nair read the petition twice, and her face did the thing Clara had learned to dread, a wince trying to be professional. He's petitioning to void the tax sale, Priya said. His claim is a notice defect. The statute requires the county to publish the auction in a paper of general circulation for 3 consecutive weeks and post the property itself. He's got an affidavit saying the posting on the mill gate wasn't there. His surveyor photographed the property twice during the notice period. If the posting failed, the sale is voidable. The parcel goes back to the county, and the county sells it to him, Clara said. The county sells it to the highest bidder, Priya said, who will be him. She rubbed her eyes. Clara, I'll be honest. Procedure cases are ugly, because nobody has to prove you did anything wrong. You could do everything right and still lose the building. When? Hearing set for September 9th. County commission, then a judge if it goes further. He's got a Charlotte firm on it. She looked at the girl across her desk, the duffel bag posture, the pin-pricked fingers, the jaw. I'll take it. No fee. But I need you to hear me. The law might not care about your side of this story. I need something that isn't a story. I need paper." Word got up the hill before Clara did. That evening the mending room filled up without being asked. Earl, Dot, Gus, Pastor Van, Iris Cole with her cane, half the Tuesday regulars, and Clara stood by the loom and told them all of it, plainly the way Meg's ledger had taught her to say hard things. The room was quiet. Then Iris Cole thumped her cane once on the old floor, like a gavel. "That man's father," she said, "tried to buy this mill from Margaret Doyle in 1996. Came twice a year like a season. She turned him down every time, and now the son wants to take from a child what the father couldn't buy from a grown woman." The cane came down again. "Not while I have breath." "Iris," Earl said quietly, "breath won't beat a Charlotte law firm." "Then what will?" "Earl Whitaker." And Clara, watching, saw it happen. Saw Earl Whitaker go very still, the carpenter's pencil motionless behind his ear, his eyes fixed on the middle distance the way a man looks when he's checking a promise against its conditions. He stood like that for a long moment while the room argued around him. Then he looked across all of them, at Clara. "Girl," he said, "you ever go asking around town about what's in the basement of this mill?" Clara's heart began to pound. "No, sir. Anybody tell you to reopen this place? Take in the town's mending? Sleep up here through a repair order with $94 to your name? No, sir. Nobody told me to do anything." "No," Earl said, half to himself. "Nobody did." He took off the half-glasses, folded them, and put them in his shirt pocket, and when he spoke again his voice had changed, older and lighter, like a man setting down a load carried so long he'd forgotten its weight. "Meg Doyle gave me two things before she passed," he said. "An envelope and a rule." She said, "Not the one who asks, the one who stays." She said I'd know. And I've stood behind that counter 3 years waiting, watching every vulture and every tourist and every developer walk through this town, and none of them stayed, and I about decided nobody ever would. He reached into his jacket and laid a small manila envelope on the cutting table. Through the paper, plain as anything, was the shape of a key. "Miss Clara Hensley," said Earl Whitaker, "I believe you've got a door to open." They went down the iron stairs together, all of them, Clara first with a key, Earl behind her with a lantern, then Gus, Dot, Pastor Van, Iris taking the steps one at a time and refusing every offered arm. The boiler room swallowed their footsteps, the furnace crouched in the lantern light, and behind it, the seam in the brick waited where it had waited for years. Gus and Earl worked the brick veneer loose with a pry bar. It came away in a sheet, mortared to a wooden frame, made to come away, and there it stood, a steel door, gray and riveted, with a brass plate and a keyhole plugged with wax. Clara dug the wax out with a seam ripper from her apron pocket, which struck her later as exactly right. The key was heavy, old-fashioned, warm from her hand. It went in stiff. She looked back once, at Earl, who nodded, at all the faces gold in the lantern light, and she turned it. The lock gave with a sound like a held breath let go. Inside was a room the size of the office above it, dry, dustless, cool as a cellar. The walls were lined with tin, and the room was full. Not with treasure. Not at first glance. With order. Bolts of cloth stood racked along one wall, wrapped in paper, labeled in the small upright hand, "The Last Run of Doyle Cotton, 1998, color fast, kept from the light." A second loom, a small one, a hand loom, oiled and wrapped, wooden filing boxes, dozens, ranked on shelves, a fireproof strongbox. And on a table in the center of the room, squared to its edges, 3 things: a thick ledger bound in green, a banker's envelope, and a letter in a cream envelope with one word on its face. "You." Clara opened the strongbox first, because Priya's voice was in her head saying paper. Inside, in labeled folders, was paper. And what paper? The original 1897 deed to the mill. 60 years of tax receipts. And on top, in a folder marked "Read First" in red pencil, a document with a law office's letterhead, dated 4 months before Margaret Doyle died. Priya Nair read it that night at the cutting table 3 times, and the 3rd time she started to laugh, a stunned, disbelieving laugh. "It's a charitable trust," she said. "She didn't die holding this property. She put the mill into the Doyle Mill Trust before she passed. Her lawyer, a Walter Grieve, drew it. The trust instructed the county on everything: the back tax settlement, the $5 minimum. And Clara. The notice. She flattened the page with her palm. The trust waived posting and prescribed the exact publication schedule, and here are the newspaper affidavits. All 3 weeks. Certified. Pelham's whole case is that the posting on the gate failed. There was never supposed to be a posting on the gate. She papered the auction herself 4 months before she died. His petition dies the moment this file hits the record. Why? Dot said. Why would a woman auction her own mill for $5? Because of the last condition, Priya said quietly, and turned the page around so they could see it. The sale terms. As is, where is, minimum bid $5, and no marketing, no realtor, no listing. Her words are in the instrument. She wrote, price it so that only someone with nothing can afford it, and advertise it so that only someone paying attention will find it. Money finds bargains, need finds doors. The room was silent except for the river. Clara opened the banker's envelope with hands that would not quite behave. Inside were United States savings bonds, decades of them in careful chronological order, and a passbook, and a note clipped to the top with the total in Meg's hand, $84,212. For the roof, the standpipe, and the first year. Not for a car. And then, because there was nothing left between her and it, Clara sat down on the floor of the tin-lined room with a lantern beside her, and she opened the letter that said you. If you're reading this, then Earl kept his word, which I never doubted, and you kept my mill, which I never doubted either, though I couldn't have told you your name. I don't know who you are. I knew who you'd be. You'd be somebody this world had already decided to waste. Somebody who bought a ruin because a ruin was what was on offer, and then, here's the part I'd have liked to see. Somebody who looked at all that broken and thought, mine to fix. Not the one who asks, the one who stays. You stayed. So this is yours, the mill, the cloth, the money, and the work. The big ledger on the table is my life's real books. Read it before you judge what I'm about to ask. Every name in it is a debt this town thinks it owes me. It doesn't. I was paying down my own account the whole time. For the years this mill took more from its people than it gave, in my father's day and, God forgive me, some in mine. You'll find names you know. You may find names that shock you. Pay attention to August of 1987. Here is what I ask. Not require. The deed is clean and you may sell tomorrow. Ask, keep one door of this place open to the town. I don't care what you make in it. Cloth, bread, noise, anything honest. A mill is not a building, it is 400 people's Tuesdays. Give them back their Tuesday, one room at a time. They'll tell you I was generous. Don't believe it. Generous is when it costs you something. All this ever cost me was money. You cost me 3 years of hoping, sight unseen. Worth every day. Keep the coffee on. MD. Clara read it twice, and then she couldn't read anything for a while, and nobody in the lantern light said a word, and Iris Cole put her hand, her whole hand, flat, on the tin wall the way she had touched the brick. It was Earl who finally cleared his throat. August of '87, he said. Somebody look. Clara pulled the green ledger onto her knees. It was the master book, the office journal upstairs had been the margins, and this was the account, 30 years of it. Names and dates and amounts. A whole secret economy of one. She turned pages to 1987, to August, and ran her finger down the column and stopped. August 14th, 1987. Ada Hensley. Mercy Hospital, Ashton, $2,316.40 paid direct. Rent, Cedar Street, 6 months. Told the landlord it was a church fund. She has a baby girl and too much pride, and I have a checkbook and none. Debt forgiven before it was owed. Some accounts you pay forward because you can't pay them back. Hensley. Clara heard her own pulse in her ears. Ada Hensley was her grandmother. A woman Clara had never met. Dead before Clara was born. A name on the one photograph that had traveled in the duffel bag through all 11 placements. And the baby girl with too much pride was Clara's mother, carried through the winter of 1987 on Margaret Doyle's quiet money, in rooms on Cedar Street. 100 yards from the bus depot bench where Clara had slept her first night in this town, 18 years old alone, thinking no one in the world had ever looked out for her. Someone had. Before she was born, someone had. Meg Doyle hadn't known Clara's name when she wrote the letter, but the mill had been waiting for a Hensley all the same, the account left open. The door locked against the heat, the coffee on. She didn't know, Clara whispered. She couldn't have known. Earl Whitaker looked at the ledger. and at the girl, and up at the dark old bones of the building above them, and he said the truest thing anyone said that whole year. Some things don't need knowing, girl. They just need keeping. Nobody slept much that night. They carried the strong box and the ledgers up to the office, and Priya spread the trust documents across the cutting table and worked over them until 2 in the morning, making small triumphant lawyer noises, while Dot ran the percolator like a night shift foreman. Gus and Otho stood guard over the tin-room door, against nothing, against everything, until Earl pointed out that it had guarded itself just fine for 3 years, and they came up sheepish for coffee. Clara sat apart with the green ledger and read. It was bigger than the office journal in every way. The journal had been Meg thinking. The ledger was Meg acting, 30 years of it, ruled and totaled. Some pages held 10 names, some held 1. There was a page from the winter of 2009 that was nothing but heating oil, 22 households, the year the plant in Ashton cut third shift. There was a column for repayments, mostly empty, and where someone had insisted on paying her back, Meg had recorded it and then, in every single case, given it away again the same month, so the money never stopped moving. Like a shuttle, like a river. And scattered through the pages, Clara began recognizing the names. Salazar, G., Trade School, 1977. Gus, Ramey, Diner Freezer, 2011. Her pie is a public utility. Dot, Whitaker, E., Floodstock, 1981. The whole inventory. A number that made Clara's eyes widen, with a note, he'll spend 40 years trying to repay this. Let him think the account book got lost. The Cole family, 4 times across 4 decades. Van, Fuentes, half the Tuesday regulars. The whole quiet town, threaded through one woman's ruled pages. Every casserole and thermos and cord of July firewood suddenly legible, not as charity to Clara at all, but as an old debt finding its way home through her, the way water finds the river. They hadn't been helping a stranger. They'd been paying Meg back the only way she'd left open. Clara looked up from the ledger at all of them. Priya bent over the trust papers. Dot rinsing cups. Earl asleep sitting up with his half glasses in his fist, and she understood that she'd had it backwards from the start. She'd thought she bought a building, and a town came with it. Meg had built a town, and left the building where it could find her. At dawn, Priya packed the banker's box, squared the lid and said, September 9th they won't know what hit them. Then she looked at Clara, tired and shining. You know the strangest part? He was never going to win. Even if you'd never found that door. The record's been sitting in book 412 for 3 years. All Pelham ever had to do was look for the truth instead of a weakness. She shouldered the box. People like that always search the tax rolls first. It tells you everything. The hearing was September 9th, at the county annex in the same room where the gavel had come down on $5. This time, the folding chairs were full. They ran out and people stood along the back wall. Mill families, church families, the Tuesday regulars. Dot with the diner closed and a sign in the window that said gone to court. Back when it's won. Pelham's attorneys went first. They were good. 2 of them, gray suits, and they built the notice defect argument like men assembling a cabinet. The statute. The surveyor's photographs of the unposted gate, the affidavit, the case law. Clean, confident, the commissioners took notes. Then Priya Nair stood up with 1 banker's box and took it apart in 11 minutes. The petitioner's entire case, she said, rests on a posting requirement that did not apply to this sale. The property was conveyed to the county under the terms of the Doyle Mill Trust. Executed February 12th, 3 years ago, recorded, properly recorded, Commissioners, Book 412, page 88, which petitioner's counsel would have found had they searched past the tax rolls. She laid the documents down one at a time, like face cards, the trust instrument, the county's written acceptance, the prescribed publication schedule, certified affidavits of publication, week 1, week 2, week 3. The sale did not merely comply with the law. The sale was designed by a lawyer, in advance, to survive exactly this challenge. She let that sit. Margaret Doyle anticipated that someone would one day try to unwind this auction. We know she anticipated it, because she wrote it down. Priya lifted the last page. From the trust's letter of instruction, if any person of means challenges this conveyance, show them this paragraph, and remind them that I sold my family's mill for $5 on purpose, which is more than they have ever done on purpose in their lives. The room did not laugh. It did something better. It exhaled. All at once, 200 people. like a building settling onto sound footing. The lead-gray suit asked for a recess. Pelham's face had gone the color of the annex walls, and it was in the recess, in the hallway by the water fountain, that the strangest thing of that whole day happened. Iris Cole walked up to Grant Pelham, tilted her head back to look at him, and said, "You favor your grandmother." Pelham blinked. "Ma'am?" "Louise Pelham. She worked second shift at Doyle from 1962 to 1974. I threaded next to her for 6 years. Iris's cane tapped the floor once. Your daddy grew up on mill wages, boy. Then he spent his life trying to buy the mill so he could feel like he'd gotten over it. Now here's you." She looked at him the way you look at weather. "There's a book up that hill with your family's name in it. When your grandmother's lungs went in 73, somebody paid Mercy Hospital and never said who. You go on and wonder about that on your drive back to Charlotte." She walked away and left him standing by the water fountain with his good handshake hanging at his side. The commission reconvened for 4 minutes. The petition was denied, with prejudice on the recommendation of county council, who used the phrase conclusively documented twice. The gavel came down. Same room. Same gavel. Different door closing, and Clara on the inside of this one too. Except this time the whole town was in there with her. Outside on the annex steps, in the September sun, people shook Clara's hand until her arm ached. Pelham came out last with his attorneys, and the crowd went quiet the way small towns do, not hostile, just watchful. He stopped in front of Clara. For a second the actual man looked out again, but it was a different actual man than the one in the doorway of the mending room. "Book 412, he said. "Page 88. She really set the whole thing up. She really did." He nodded slowly, chewing on nothing for once. "My grandmother used to talk about her," he said, almost to himself. "Miss Meg. I thought it was just old people talk." He looked up the hill, where the smokestack stood against the sky with its ghost letters. "Riverline's dead on this bluff. You won't see me again." He got 2 steps, then stopped and said the rest without turning around. "The hospital thing. In 73. Was that, come read the book sometime," Clara said. "One door's always open." He didn't answer. But in November, a check arrived at the mending room from an LLC nobody could trace, made out to the Doyle Mill Trust, in the amount of $2,316.40 to the penny, with a memo line that said, simply, "Account settled." Clara framed the check stub and never told anyone but Earl who she thought it was from. Earl studied it a long minute, put his half-glasses away and said, "Which, from Earl, was a whole sermon. The bonds fixed the standpipe first, because Meg had said the standpipe, and Meg, it turned out, was generally right. Then the roof, the real roof, done proper by a crew from Ashton who kept finding excuses to work late, because Dot ran food up the hill at 6. The county inspector came back in October, walked the building with his clipboard and signed off with a small strange smile, like a man closing a file he'd been sorry to open. The mending room grew a second table, then a third. Clara hired Iris Cole's great-niece part-time, and then a retired upholsterer named Sam Fuentes, and they moved the old hand loom up from the tin room, and Iris, 81 years old, hands like brown paper, began teaching anyone who'd sit still long enough how to weave on it, using the last bolts of Doyle cotton for warp. The first thing woven on a Doyle loom in 27 years was a baby blanket. It sold before it came off the frame, and Clara pinned the $5 bill from the sale to the office wall, next to the deed. She read the green ledger the way some people read scripture, a few entries at a night. She started a new column in the back, in her own hand, under a heading she copied from Meg's, paid forward. The first entry went in on a cold night in late November. Clara was locking the big oak door when she saw him, a kid on the loading dock, hood up, backpack worn the particular way she knew. Sitting the particular way she knew, on the edge, arm through the strap, ready to be told to move along. 16, maybe 17. She recognized everything about him without knowing his name, the way you recognize your own handwriting. She didn't ask where he was staying. You never ask that. There's no good answer and both of you know it. Instead, she opened the door back up and said, "You hungry?" I was about to put coffee on. His name was Dominic. He'd come from a placement in Ashton that had come apart, which is the phrase kids use so they don't have to use other phrases. He was 3 months from aging out, and he had a duffel bag, and Clara had to turn away and busy herself with the percolator when she saw it, because it was canvas, and it was green. And some things rhyme so hard they hurt. He ate 2 plates. He kept looking around the mill floor, the machines, the racked cloth, the tall dark windows, the way she had looked at it that first day. Like a cathedral, like a question. "There's a room in the back," Clara said, as if it had just occurred to her. As if her heart wasn't going like a shuttle. Caught in it. Wood stove. It's nothing fancy. But it locks from the inside, and it's warm, and it's yours till you figure out what's next. No conditions. She paused, and then gave him the only condition. The real one. The one she'd been given. "Well, 1, in the morning there's work, if you want it. Not because you owe me. Because idle hands, and all that." Dominic looked at the plate, and at her, and at the room. Working the arithmetic of trust the way she used to work the arithmetic of money. A math where you've been shorted so many times you check every figure twice. "What is this place?" he said finally. Clara looked down the long floor, at the loom standing in the shadows with the reading glasses on their chain, and she gave him Meg's words, because they had become her words, the way an inheritance does. "It's 400 People's Tuesdays," she said. 401 now. Come on, I'll show you where the blankets are." She wrote it in the ledger that night, in the new column, dating it carefully, keeping the account. November 28. Dominic, W. 17, supper the back room, work in the morning. Debt forgiven before it was owed. And below it, because the ledger was hers now and she could, Miss Meg, the coffee's on. CH. Dominic took the work. Of course he took the work was the point, both of them knew it, the way both of them knew the room was really the point. And neither said so. He was good with machines. Better than good. Within a month he had the second sewing machine timed sweeter than the manual said was possible, and he'd taken the punch clock apart on the cutting table just to see its heart, and put it back together running 2 minutes truer. Gus adopted him the way old tradesmen adopt, by insulting his technique daily and teaching him everything. Iris fed him. Earl opened him an account. Some nights Clara would find him on the mill floor after hours, just standing in the dark with the lantern, looking up at the tall windows, and she never asked what he was doing, because she knew exactly what he was doing. He was doing rounds. He was learning the sound of a roof that would still be over him in the morning. In January he asked her, casual as a man asking about whether a person could get a GED and still maybe do trade school after, or whether that was, Gus's trade school got paid for out of this building in 1977. Clara said, not looking up from her hemming. Page 91, if you want to see it. We'd be keeping a tradition. Dominic was quiet a while. This place, he said finally. It's not really a business, is it? It's a business, Clara said. It just keeps 2 sets of books. She tied off the thread and bit it, and gave him the rest of it straight, because grown people can carry the truth. 1 set's in dollars. That one has to balance or none of the rest works. Meg was clear about that, and she was right. The other set doesn't balance. It's not supposed to. It just has to keep moving. He thought about that all the way to the door. Then he stopped, hand on the frame, and said the thing she'd write in the ledger later, under his name, because it was the sound of an account opening. Whose name goes in it next? 5 months later, in April, the town holds a supper on the mill floor. It is Doyle Mill's 128th birthday, and Dot's idea, and nobody counts heads, but the folding chairs run out again, and this time it's a good thing. The long tables are Gus's door slabs. The tablecloths are woven cotton, Doyle cotton, warped from 1998 and weft from this winter. Old thread and new thread carrying the same cloth. Iris says that's the whole trick of weaving. And of towns, and then pretends she didn't say anything wise. Dominic runs the coffee. He is taller than he was in November. He has opinions now, about percolators, about pallet wood, about a girl in his GED class. He clocks in every morning on a punch card, because Clara found a working punch clock at an estate sale and could not help herself. His card sits in the rack beside a yellowed one that no one is allowed to move. Doyle, Margaret. Employee no. 1. In the office, the tin of peppermints sits refilled on the desk. Clara keeps it stocked, and the Tuesday regulars keep it emptied, and this is understood by all parties to be the system working as intended. The quilt is mended. The green ledger lives in the strong box, but the new column comes out often, and it is getting long. And on the loom, the big loom, the cast iron one, cleaned now and oiled, though it will never run again, the reading glasses hang on their beaded chain, exactly where a woman left them when she stepped away for a moment, 3 years and a lifetime ago. Toward the end of the evening, Clara slips away from the noise and stands by the loom with a cup of coffee, one hand on the cold iron the way she does. Through the tall windows, the river runs on below the bluff, patient as ever, wearing everything down to what it really is. Which was Meg's point all along, Clara thinks. Wear it all down. The money, the buildings, the words on the smokestack, and what's left is the only thing that was ever real. What you did for people when nobody wrote your name on it. Earl appears beside her in that silent way of his, surveys the crowded floor over his half glasses, and delivers his verdict. Huh, he says. Yeah, Clara says. That's what I thought too. The glasses sway on their chain, just slightly, in the warmth rising off all those Tuesdays. And if you drive through Harlan Falls tonight, up River Bluff Road, you'll see the windows of the old mill lit up gold against the dark, every one of them whole now, every one of them warm. Some doors are locked not to keep people out but to make sure the right person comes looking. And some inheritances aren't left to a name. They're left to whoever stays.